let's delve a little bit into what the films talk about. So let me introduce you to our brilliant panelists. So we have John Elkington, who is the godfather of sustainability. I don't know how you feel about that title. Author, thought leader, new book out last week. His 21st book came out last week. And John famously coined the term triple bottom line back in 1994. That's a good pub quiz bit of knowledge, I think. Welcome to you, John. Nice to have you with us. And we have Kate Norgrove, Executive Director of Conservation, Advocacy and Policy at WWF UK. A very, very experienced campaigner, leader and communicator. And she's here today as the spokesperson, essentially, for the Save Our Wild Isle partnership, together with RSPB and National Trust. And we will also hear from those partners throughout the event as well. Thank you, Kate, for being here. You've just returned from Colombia, have you?
Yes, from Brazil and Colombia. Yeah. Hot off the press. Yeah. The good news is that there is still a lot of nature left, but it is disappearing fast. That was my experience of Brazil and Colombia.
Okay, so eyewitness, you're going to give us a lot of those examples, I think. Let's dive in. So we hear a lot about the climate crisis, clearly, but nature is often not so high on the corporate radar. Kate, just elaborate. You've started to tell us a little bit about the current state of nature. Where are we? What's a sort of, I don't know if you sort of say a stock take.
That sounds a bit techie, but
yeah.
But it's true that nature is fast disappearing, and we're in a bit of a crisis. We have lost 68%, three-quarters of our global wildlife populations in the last 50 years. That's according to WWF's Living Planet Index. And the next version of that, which will show similar decline, is coming out towards the end of this year. We've also lost, in the UK, we're in the bottom 10% of countries globally. That's bottom of the G7, bottom of the G20 in terms of nature loss. So we are an extremely nature-depleted country. The good news is, though, that we are all really united as a country behind acting on climate and nature. And of course, nature and climate are two sides of the same coin. Without nature, you can't tackle climate change. And nature has done a huge job at drawing down and reducing the impacts of climate change. But the issue for business is that while many businesses have taken on the challenge of climate change, albeit not quite fast enough. So we've got 83% of corporates globally have set climate targets. The same is not true for nature. Only 5% of corporates have set targets to tackle their impact on nature. And the two things are very interrelated and need to be tackled at the same time.
Okay, brilliant. And we'll unwrap a little bit about how we do that in a minute. John, what are the risks for business that come from ignoring nature?
Good morning, everyone. One of the risks was demonstrated very powerfully for a company called Walmart in 2005, where overnight they lost 100 of their stores when Hurricane Katrina hit. It's very interesting to see what the response to that disaster has been over time. There's something like $50 billion now going into rewilding of the southern states to put nature back to sort of temper the flooding, the storm damage, and so on. So Kate's absolutely right. 5% is probably an exaggeration in terms of the number of companies that are seriously paying attention to nature. But there is this growing sense that resilience is critical, and we've got to regenerate nature to get that resilience.
Does Walmart acknowledge that that was nature, what done it, if you see what I mean? I mean, did that spur action within that company?
Well, Walmart is a peculiar company, you all know that. But one of the things that happened almost overnight was that their then CEO got religion in the sense that he suddenly understood that climate change was a major risk to the business. But what did he do? He cascaded a lot of that pressure out through their supply chain. And I think we're going to see a lot more about that, where big companies get a powerful signal and they don't want to do it all themselves. They want to push it out into their supply chain. So within 4 or 5 months of that tragedy, in a way, I did board meetings for DuPont and for 3M, both really impressive companies over quite a long time, big problems as well. And both of them were on the back foot because suddenly this was coming through the market, not through regulators. And I think that's one of the shifts in this space, that the risks to businesses are now less calculable because they're not simply, you're not just watching Brussels and Washington, D.C. the whole time and predicting what they'll do. This can come up overnight when you have a disaster or some problem like that.
Okay, let's unwrap a little bit more about what we do. So there's obviously benefits to reducing impact on nature. So what are the benefits and how can businesses unlock them? So how can a business reduce its impact on nature? And do give us more examples because those are brilliant. So John.
I don't know how many of you came down this morning or across on the Elizabeth line. It was my first time. What an impressive bit of infrastructure.
Yes, I did, and I'm blown away by it. Look, I'm just like, wow.
Really remarkable. How many of you then know that Crossrail, the organization behind that project, an immense project, took 3 million tons of spoil and put it near Foulness and created a wetland ecosystem, or recreated. But 18 months ago, through WWF, we went to visit that site. It's really, really impressive. So that's one example of an organization being creative. I'll give you one other. I mentioned Walmart. Walmart, Unilever, PepsiCo, Nestle, Danone, all of these companies are committing now to regenerative farming. I'm not sure they all totally understand what they mean by it, but some part of regenerative agriculture has to be not just repairing water cycles, but putting wildlife, putting nature back into the landscape.
What does it mean? Sorry, that's cruel.
Well, one of the things I think we're seeing a lot of at the moment, and you've seen Mercedes backing off their electric vehicles by 100% EVs by 2030. You've seen Shell backing off. You've seen Unilever backing off. And I think one of the things that we're not all doing enough of is going and visiting some of these companies and finding out, thank you for your promises, commitments on, in this case, regenerative farming. Just tell us how that's working. Tell us how you're measuring progress. And that, with all of the companies I just mentioned, that's one of the things I'm quite keen to do next.
Site visits, love it. Love a site visit. Okay, Kate, give me some answers and examples of things that a business can do to reduce impact on nature.
So the main thing, the first thing to do is to assess one's impact on nature. And as John was talking about, all of those companies will have done some baselining to assess their impacts. And then set targets. So the Science Based Targets Initiative has target suggestions for climate, but also for nature. So we need to be setting those targets as fast as we can. Then acting, and as John said, the important thing is to assess the supply chain actions that you can take, and in some cases those can be extremely complex. So, for example, with Tesco's or with Sainsbury's, they've got an extremely complex supply chain that goes into multiple countries and through multiple suppliers. And the important thing that they're doing is working together within competition law to make that transition faster and more effective by working together. And I was just going to add, actually, that sharing the risks and the benefits all the way along that supply chain is also super important. We need to be supporting those suppliers and communities to be able to make that transition. And then lastly, is to advocate the importance of aligning all of a company's corporate lobbying behind those targets for both climate and nature. And I'd like to just put a little plug in, if I may, for something called Nature's Workforce, which is a tool for any employee to use in their corporates. Because I guess the thing that I'm most passionate about is that if you're interested in climate and nature, the best place that you can be at the moment is in the company you're working for now. just asking questions, using your voice, asking what the impact of the company is on nature, and then assessing, setting targets, and starting to act. It's incredibly important, and so that's the thing to do. So go and have a look at the Save Our Wild Isles stand, which is in this building. Go and talk to the people on that stand around nature's workforce. Show those films in your company to persuade your CEO to take action, and we'll all have faster success than had we not done that. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's a really good call to action. Please go to the stand, and please make sure that you download that toolkit. Very important. John, so I was going to ask you both for where should people start? Because there's actually a lot of people here today. Look how popular our stage is. Come on. This is a popular subject. What's the kind of first thing that would be good to do as a sort of jumping off?
Well, two, if I may. One is get out more. With lockdowns, COVID and all the rest of it, we tended to sort of hunker down and stay at home and so on. And we're starting to get used again to being back in the office. But we, I think, need to take our teams out into nature and with people who can really explain to them what they're seeing. That immersion in nature can have a profound impact. There's one other thing I would suggest, and it's not an easy one. Boards are often overestimated in terms of their absolute power over organizations and companies. But if you look at boards, very few of them have somebody trained in biology or ecology as members. I think one of the things we've got to do is get more people at that level in governance systems of one sort or another who understand nature in a deep way so that they can start to push that agenda effectively.
Thank you very much. Kate, do you have anything, one last, if you had to cherry pick one of your points to start?
Download Nature's Workforce, which gives you all of the steps you need to take, and feel a sense of urgency. I mean, I cannot get across to you what it feels like to be in Brazil or in Colombia, where you can see the impact of the soy that we feed our chickens every day. I mean, literally saw fields of soy butting up against rainforest, and witnessed a woman who owns or is involved in a private reserve who's been trying to keep bees but hasn't been able to. They've all been dying because of the pesticides that are being sprayed on the fields next door. So it's hard to explain just how urgent this is, but also what a brilliant role you can all play. Download Nature's Workforce, speak up, speak out in your companies, and we'll get there in the end.
Thank you so much. Can I have a round of applause, please, for our brilliant panelists, for Kate Norgrove and John Elkington. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.